Cyber Vayu Frogs. Can we do it? No, we can't. For the monsters, I play 3 copies of Substitute. Substitute is an absolutely insane combo card in the Frog deck. As you will see in this profile, I do not only play this as a Fish OTK deck with Coelacanth. I also focus heavily on the fact that Substitute is a very powerful enabler for all of your plays. Thus I decided to take inspiration from the Dream Frog deck by playing Substitute as a standalone good card, both being a starter which can access your swap frog to set up your plays with Treeborn, but also use this in tandem with various frog effects. Allows you to come out of nearly any situation, even when you don't draw the Coelacanth. We'll talk about this more later, but this is not your average Fish OTK deck which goes all in. This is Dream Fish Frogs. Continuing on with the main deck, I have 3 copies of Swap Frog. In Edison format, Swap Frog can be bounced back infinitely, even though you don't get additional normal summons past the first one. There are a lot of combos you can do with this card by looping back your tribute summons, or replacing various frogs on your field with the ones in your hand thanks to its effect. The only real problem with the frog deck is all your monsters are under 1500, so a deck devastation virus can be, well, devastating. Naturally, I've built my deck to have work around both deck devastation virus but also royal oppression. And when your opponent doesn't have those particular cards, you're playing one of the strongest decks in the format. Then I play 3 copies of Dupe Frog. This is an important resource to always be able to have multiple Dupe Frogs on the field, thus having a Dupe Lock, which prevents your opponent from declaring an attack. Additionally, with its 2000 defense points, you're able to wall out cards like Sirocco, or any other large normal summon your opponent may have, be it a Stratos or a Dark Refer. Then for some of the utility frogs, I have 1 copy of Death Frog and 1 copy of Unifrog. Similar to the Dream Frog deck, being able to have a Death Frog, which is a 1900 attack beat stick, and a level 5 for your Fishborg Blaster Synchro summons, as well as the Unifrog being able to out cards like Pulling the Rug or Royal Oppression, if you normal summon it. Gives your deck a lot of flexibility, and something that the typical Frog Monarch deck didn't have back in the day. And then of course I play 2 copies of Treeborn Frog. This is not really a card that you can afford to cut down on. There's a lot of situations where you bounce back your Treeborn Frog to your hand with Swap Frog's effect, or your opponent may use DD Crow on it to banish it from the graveyard, and thus having the second copy to counteract their DD Crow is very important. And then for the fishes, I have 3 copies of Super Ancient Deep Sea King Coelacanth. Albeit a level 7, thus requiring 2 tributes to be able to get him to the field. Once he resolves, the game is usually over. Coelacanth will flood your field with fish monsters, and from there you can make any synchro play that you see fit. Coelacanth can set up for some very easy Armory Arm and Colossal Fighter OTKs. Back in Edison format, there is a ruling where if you have a Colossal Fighter and you own the Armory Arm equipped to your opponent's monster, as long as their monster is more than 2800 attack, you can keep ramming the Colossal Fighter into their monster. Sure, you take some battle damage, but your opponent will take the 2800 burn each time you do this. Additionally, the Armor Arm stacks, so if you have 2 Armory Arm, you can do double the damage. And then you can even OTK against something that has 900 attack, by allowing it to go above the 2800 threshold. Do keep in mind that Colossal Fighter boosts himself by 100 per warrior in the graveyards. So just make sure to check if your opponent has any Armageddonites or Dark Refers in their graveyard, so you don't fumble on the OTK. This deck is sort of like a toolbox deck, both with the frog cards that can allow you to do a myriad of different plays based on what you're aiming to do, but also with Coelacanth, being able to give you essentially any levels you want for your synchro summons. Can allow you to out any board your opponent may present, or present your own nearly unbreakable fields. Unfortunately, Coelacanth does require us to play some less than ideal fish monsters in our deck to summon with his effect. So while Coelacanth does negate their effects while they're on the field, it is good to play the fishes that are the best if you do happen to draw them. So the first fish brick that I do play is 1 copy of Golden Flying Fish. Golden Flying Fish contributes a fish on your side of the field to pop a card on the field. Royal Swamp Eel is a fish tuner. Unfortunately, Royal Swamp Eel has a condition placed on him that he cannot be used as synchro summon unless the other materials are fish. Unlike Vayu the Emblem of Honor, Royal Swamp Eel's effect is a little different based on the wording of the card. Thus, even if his effect is to be negated with Coelacanth, you still cannot synchro with him and a non-fish type monster. But luckily we play plenty of fishes, so that is not much of a concern. Then I play 2 copies of Oystermeister. When Oystermeister is sent from the field to the graveyard, except when he is destroyed by a battle, you can summon a level 1 token. This gives you some variety in your synchro plays, and an important distinction between negated and cannot activate its effects is that you can still pay the cost to attempt to use Golden Flying Fish to pop a card. So say you resolve the Coelacanth and you summon a variety of fish. Should you want to exchange the Oystermeister for its token, you can attempt to use Golden Flying Fish, tribute the Oystermeister, target a card on the field. It is not destroyed because Golden Flying Fish is negated, but Oystermeister will still trigger and summon a token. Thus you don't need to synchro away the Oystermeister to get a token. This sometimes comes up when you summon the Fishborg Blaster with Coelacanth and you have no more discards to bring it back. By doing this, you can go for different level synchro plays, should you not have enough discards in your hand to facilitate the Fishborg Blaster multiple times. This card is a big reason why I wanted to play a larger frog package, so I have the Dream Frog aspect of this deck as well. Instead of building your deck to solely rely on Coelacanth to win the game, I think it is much more important to play these cards as an engine, and if you happen to draw the Coelacanth, you can summon it as a bomb and win the game from that. But should you not draw Coelacanth, you also have other plays at your disposal. That's it for the fishes. And then a very important tool in this deck to be able to play when you don't see Coelacanth or the necessary pieces to facilitate an OTK is 3 copies of Caius the Shadow Monarch. Caius the Shadow Monarch is the most powerful monarch in Edison format. We can facilitate his tribute summon essentially for free by tributing the Treeborn Frog. And if we have a multitude of frog monsters, we can use Swap Frog to bounce the Caius back to our hand, and summon him yet again on the following turn. That's it for the tributes. Then I play 1 copy of Gorse, the Emissary of Darkness. A common play you do with the frog deck is you go normal summon Swap Frog turn 1, and use his effect to send a Treeborn Frog to the graveyard, and then you return the Swap Frog to your hand, leaving yourself completely open to your opponent's attacks. This makes Gorse a very good counterplay to your opponent trying to rush you down before you get a chance to establish your Fish OTK. Then I play 3 copies of Cyber Valley. That's it for the monsters. For the spell cards I play 3 copies of Salvage. If you open with Salvage, a Swap Frog and any water under 1500 attack, by special summoning Swap Frog and sending a Substitute to the graveyard, and add them both back with Salvage, you can go for a full Substitute combo on your first turn. Additionally, if your opponent activates Deck Devastation Virus and destroys a bunch of your frogs in your hand, you can add them back with Salvage. Salvage is also a great tool at reusing your effects, similar to a Pot of Avarice, because you can very easily summon the frogs from your hand. So I think Salvage just solves pretty much every issue that the frog deck has, which is why you see Dream Frogs and a lot of other variants play 3 copies of this card. That's why I also think that the Fish OTK deck should utilize this card, because it is good in any water-based strategy for Edison formats. And should you have too many waters in your hand, you can always put them back in the deck with Moray of Greed. As the Fish Frog deck plays way more water monsters than the typical frog deck does, it makes sense to play Moray of Greed because you play a lot more cards in your deck which you don't really want to draw. So despite Moray of Greed having the issue of not being able to be used early game, because you don't want to put back those particular waters which are actually useful for your combo, should you draw any of your worst water monsters, or activate a Salvage to get 2 of them back to your hand, the Moray of Greed can be quite clutch. And then I play 1 copy of 1-for-1 to tutor either Substitute or Fishborg Blaster from my deck, 1 copy of Heavy Storm to clear the way for my OTK, and 1 copy of Brain Control. Brain Control can not only facilitate game pushes, or out cards like Fossil Dyna, it can also be an additional body to tribute for your Coelacanth, or an additional tribute for your Substitute to gain another frog to your field. I chose not to main deck MST or Giant Trunade, because I think this deck has enough ways to deal with back row. Then for the traps, I have 3 copies of Raigeki Break. There are plenty of discards in this deck, not only cards that you get for free to your hand, but also cards that are just bad to have in your hand. So the Raigeki Break is usually a very easily activatable card, and it's a very clean spot removal. You can just get rid of anything for the rest of the game. It is often a safer play to Raigeki Break a Mask of Restrict or a Fossil Dyna Patches of Follow, as opposed to putting it at the top of their deck with Phoenix Wing Wing Blast. Additionally, there are some situations where you actually Raigeki Break your own cards, or you Raigeki Break in response to a Heavy Storm, just to get the Treeborn live. Then I play 1 copy of Torrential Tribute, and 1 copy of Trap Dust Shoot. I like to have some defensive cards in my main deck, and these are just the most versatile and consistent ones. And Dust Shoot is just a god card. Then for the extra deck, I have 2 copies of Armory Arm. Some OTK lines actually require 2 copies, so I think 2 is a must. And having a 4-star to go into with Oystermeister and Fishbowl Blaster can be quite needed. Then I play 1 copy of Magical Android, 1 copy of Ally of Justice Cataster, 1 Bryanak Dragon of the Ice Barrier, a very important tool for your OTKs. And luckily a Water Monster, so you can ladder up with this and a Fishbowl Blaster into level 7s or 8s. 1 copy of Flamvell Urquises. This guy does piercing damage, so should your opponent have a Amaryllis on the field, for example, in defense position, you can summon Urquises, equip him with 2 copies of Armory Arm, and you almost one-shot your opponent. He also comes up sometimes with Book of Moon plays, post side. Then I play 1 copy of Goya Guardian, 1 copy of X-Saber Herbalum, 1 copy of Black Rose Dragon, 1 copy of Fatrul Archfiend, 2 copies of Colossal Fighter. The Colossal Armory Arm OTK is usually how you win when you resolve Coelacanth. So the reason why I'm playing 2 copies of this card is sometimes through Necrogardna, you need to make 2 of these and 2 Armory Arm to ensure you can win through their attack negate. 1 copy of Red Dragon Archfiend, mainly because of his 3000 attack points, but also because you can kill through a defense position wall. 1 copy of Stardust Dragon. And the 15th card is 1 copy of Mistworm, being a very good card to just return your opponent's entire field to the hand and push for an OTK. Then for the side deck, I have 2 copies of DD Crow. We have talked about this card before, but DD Crow is a very good card to prevent yourself from dying against the combo mirror matches. Then I have 1 copy of Flip Flop Frog. Flip Flop Frog checks on resolution, so you cannot negate him with something like Titanial, because he simply does not target. The reason why he's not in my main deck is because he's not that good against Vayu or Blackwing, so you can just side him in against those matchups where you want the Flip Flop Frog against. 1 copy of Teva. Teva is a very interesting card. It is sort of like a Monarch, where it has an on-field trigger when it's summoned. What Teva does is it copies the effect of Threatening Roar, making sure you're safe from your opponent's attacks next turn. I'm just citing 1 copy of Teva, partially because he is recyclable with Swap Frog. So once you see the 1 Teva, you summon it, and then you bounce it back with Swap Frog each turn. And since they cannot attack over the Swap Frog, you just bring back Treeborn, sack it for Teva, bounce it back, and keep doing this until you want to go for your OTK push. Additionally, the Teva is mainly useful for the combo mirror matches, so it's not something that I would take in against Blackwing or Vayu, for example, thus making it a quite niche side deck card, but a very important tool to ensure that you can survive. Additionally, the Teva can be very good against inexperienced players because they just simply don't know what to do when they can't OTK you. And after you've looped Teva across a few turns and you gather your combo pieces, if your opponent didn't anticipate it, you can sometimes just cheese out a game with Colossal Armory Arm from a Coelacanth. Then I side 1 copy of Dark Dust Spirit. Dark Dust is quite nice against the Dream Frog mirror match, because the Dream Frog deck usually wins the game by putting up an insurmountable field with a bunch of frog monsters, and running a Monarch train on you each turn. And Dark Dust is a great way of playing around Monarchs, but also dealing with dupe locks. Additionally, this card is very good against Amaryllis, because you can deal with Titanials. Then I side 2 copies of Vanity's Fiend. It's a strong way of shutting out decks like the Mirror Match, or any combo-based strategy. And as we talked about before with Regeki Break, sometimes you can pop your own Vanity's Fiend, should you want to go off and go for game. 1 copy of Mystical Space Typhoon and 1 Giant Trunade. Having more back removal can be very good against the control decks, particularly when they bring in floodgates like Mask of Restrict against you. Then I side 2 copies of Book of Moon. Book of Moon is a very good card at dealing with cards like Arc Lord Christia, Fossil Dynapochcephalo, Banisher of the Radiance, Vanity's Fiend. Any floodgate really that you need to deal with can be dealt with by Book of Moon. Book of Moon is also very good against the combo decks. For example, you can put a Substitute face down to stop them going through their entire deck. Or after your Gigavise opponent activates Supervise on Gigaplant, you can Book of Moon it face down, and that often stops their combo in their tracks. Then I side 2 copies of Threatening Roar. Threatening Roar is a good way of making sure that you survive against the combo decks. And against decks like Fishbowl Frogs, where either they go for the entire push and you can use Threatening Roar to survive, you can also use Threatening Roar against an opposing Vanity's Fiend. and then you can tribute over your monster that you were able to protect with the Threatening Roar. And that can allow you to, for example, Caius, or Dark Dust Spirit, or Vanity's Fiend over an opposing Vanity's Fiend. And lastly, I have 2 copies of Trap Stun. When this deck goes off, your opponent's life points will be at 0, so just stunning their back row for a turn can be very good. Additionally, the Trap Stun can be activated in your standby phase before you bring back Treeborn, so unlike something like Cold Wave, which can play into a card like Icarus Attack, the Trap Stun can be played immediately, and then you can go for your OTK. If you enjoy my content, make sure to also subscribe to my second channel, linked in the description box down below. There I'll be posting more personalized and exclusive content.